Good day and welcome to this episode of Quilting with Don. If you're just tuning in, I have been working on a project that I am calling Stars and Feathers. It's a paper piece, foundation paper piece quilt that I've already finished the top. There it is there. And I have started using free motion sewing, free motion quilting to, well, quilt the top. You may also recall, if you saw the last episode, oh no, I can't remember if I showed you this, maybe I didn't, that I also pieced, with the leftover fabric from the top, I pieced my backing. So now, it's simply a matter of getting down to it and sewing, quilting the feathers and other designs onto my quilt top with my trusty Singer Confidence Quilter and the free motion foot. Now, I've done a bit of work since you saw me last, also working on designs but also practicing. So, first of all, I came up with a couple ways to quilt down the insides of the stars, because you might have noticed last time they were a little poofy and they need to be sewn down or quilted down. So I came up with a couple ideas. First, I tried something that's fairly straightforward, and I'll zoom in on that, I suppose. But I didn't quite like it. So Carolyn came up with an idea, and I showed the background too. Why don't you use stipples in between the points of the star? I'm just going to do straight up and down into each point. Well, relatively, it'll be a curve to have a featherous shape to fill in the inside of the point. And then I use stipples on the outside and the feather design that I'd already just put in around each star set of points. So then I practiced that, and I've been doing a lot of practice. I've been working on the other designs, which is around each star and in the blocky areas. And then I practiced them some more with my new design. So I've done a lot of practice. And now the trick is going to be to actually start sewing. So that's the plan. I've already sewn one of these stars, and I followed my pattern, and I find it's just a bit too dense. So unfortunately the camera didn't cooperate for showing you. So I'm going to show you this one now. Hopefully the camera cooperates. And I'm only going to do one loop in each point. Putting two loops in each point it's okay, but it's very dense, and it completely flattens the star. I want to have a little bit of texture still. So here we go. Second star. Oh, I've also, as you can see, I have an extra light to give me more light on where I'm sewing. It's all good. All right, here we go. Have a look. Yes, texture is much better on what I'm doing now. So I might end up doing some unsewing on the first one to remove those inner lines. We shall see. Or I might just leave it. But this is working. Done. So I've actually done two feather patterns around the stars. So look at it, check it out. They come out great, eh? And the star's got a bit of texture. Now it is hard to see, but I'm hoping you're seeing the feathers. And just to show you what it looks like on the back side, there we are. So you get the idea. It's working out all right. Yeah. And you can definitely see the poofage with the double batting as a result on the lighter side. But it's coming out quite nicely. So I've done two. The second one is better than the first. And I'll just keep plugging away at it. In fact, I have now sewn all of the feathers around each of these stars, all 5 of the big ones, and around each of the half stars all around the quilt. So let me show you how it looks. So, it's a little hard with the light to see on the dirks, but you can see the feathers around the stars and the half stars. Isn't that great? And then, you get the idea. So it's almost done. I have left to do the 4 blocks around each quadrant. So before I do that, before I get to sewing it, and it's going well, I like the way it's coming out. Let me tell you something I did just a few days ago. I was an angel. Not many times I'm ever called that, but I was an angel at a recent guild workshop. So if you remember in the last episode or 2 episodes ago, I gave you a sneak preview of a quilt I couldn't tell you about. Well, it turns out that quilt was, and I'm showing here in all its glory, that quilt was a sample, and I was a guinea pig for a workshop quilt called a mystery workshop that Carolyn had me do. She said, try this. And then I went through it and I checked the instructions and I had questions to say, I don't quite understand this, I don't quite understand that. And there was, made some changes, made the instructions to make it more dawn resistant. I think I might have mentioned that 2 times ago. Anyway, the point is, as a result of that, I got to be an angel at this workshop, so I was helping other ladies do their mystery quilt, and they were fed a piece of the project at a every half hour, 45 minutes. They said, okay, here's the next step. Chose your fabric, you sorted them into piles, you sewed them in strips, then you cut the strips in a certain way. It was very cool, and it produced this quilt. I'm going to try to convince Carolyn to do a Quilting with Carolyn video where she shows how she did that. We'll see if I can get her to do that. Anyway, it came out great. That was my quilt. This is Carolyn's quilt. And then the ladies that had also done it, there were 45 participants and about 12 or 13 angels. So it was a big crowd. There were some amazing things done that day. But I can't show you because I don't have permission to show you these other people's work. If I do get it, I will. So now, all I've got left to do is these 4 sections. So let's get on with it. I thought I'd show you how I draw ahead of time before I sew my pattern. So this is one of those 4 blocks. I have done 2 of them already. What I'm going to use to mark it is this little chalk pencil that I borrowed from Carolyn. And my pattern is simply to divide this quadrant into the pieces and then add the sewing lines for the base of each feather. So my pattern does this. I do a 45-degree from each corner. So there's 45 there. And you could, hopefully it shows up on the camera, you can see how it's marking it there. And then I do another 45 here. Lining it up, pretty close. There we go. And I repeat over here. There we go. And over there. Okay, I'll have to turn this around. My camera's in the way. I know what I'm going to do. This way. I'm feeling really dumb here. There we go. Yeah. And I join the 2 here. Hopefully it's just about 3 inches, and it is. There. So these are the 1, 2, 3, 4 quadrants that I'm going to put feathers in. And for each one, I'm going to do a halfway line, and this is where I'm going to sew. So I sew along this line here, and then I'll be running the feathers on both sides of the line. Similarly, about halfway there. And you can see how puffy this material is. So you can see why the quilting is essential to sew it down. Yeah, I'm just eyeballing it now, but you get the idea, right? Click another bit more chalk here. And last one right around there. There, so what I do is I sew these 4 curved lines in one sweep, and then I run the feathers around. First I've been doing the inside pass and then the outside pass. And that's how I'm making the feathers for these 4 blocks. Right, going back into the feathers. I had to do an unsew this morning. Not going to show it to you. But it's amazing how 5 minutes of sewing generates 45 minutes of unsewing. I sew my feather on the wrong line. It can happen. So hopefully I got the right line this time. done, and let's keep going at it. All right, I have finished the last quadrant of those blocks. But before I show you how it came out, I have one more thing to do to finish quilting this quilt. And I've decided what I'm going to do is for the border here, I'm going to do what I affectionately call Carolyn laps. She came up with a style which I don't think is exactly unique, but what she does is just keeps going around about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch width all the way around the border with a straight line. So it just keeps lapping around, and then you jump another 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch, go around again. So I'm going to do the same thing with the same blue thread, just to add a ribbing on this border. I decided that's a little simpler and a little less dramatic than what I was going to do, which was a bunch more feathers, because those feathers I think were going to be too tight. As it is, I've got some pretty tight feathers, so I'm going to do these laps now, get that done, and then it's quilting. Quilt is done. I have finished Stars and Feathers. Since I last reported, I did the laps around, which I'll show you in a sec, and then I bound it. Binding is something I'm getting pretty good at. I even had Carolyn come over briefly just to make sure I was still going to do it right, and it turned out I was. So let me show you how it came out first. So you can see I had the ribbed binding, of course the feathers, and what's in the star. More feathers. You can see the block. It's very hard to see the quilting on it from this angle. Maybe it'll show up a little better over here. Yeah, it does. Yeah, I think it came out really good. And then, the back. So, now, the feathers are not perfect, and I do have a bit of a summation along that theme. This really was a training quilt. Let me show you a bit more here. Oop, there we go. So you get the idea. There's the back of one of those quadrant blocks. Came out all right. So, as I say, this was a training quilt, and so no, it won't go in a show. If it does, it'll only be this. I don't want anyone looking at it too closely, because yeah, I made a few mistakes, but that's actually one of the lessons learned. It's okay to make mistakes. I did some unsewing when I sewed the feathers on the wrong line, because clearly that was wrong. But if it didn't quite work out, if it didn't come back to the line I was supposed to, or they didn't join up with the previous feather, that was okay. When I mirrored a feather to go on to the next one, if it didn't quite follow the exactly same line, that was okay. I really got good and consistent at my feathers. By the end, by the last block, it came up pretty good. So that's one of the big lessons learned. You don't learn something overnight. It takes practice, and I did a lot of practicing with these feathers on this quilt. Super chuffed about that. Another lesson learned was to precision on paper piecing. Now, it's been a while since I pieced this, but the points are all good. Everything lines up, and when I put the blocks together, I made sure they lined up as well. That's precision sewing, and that's something, if you've got the time, take the time and do it right the first time. That's probably all my big lessons for this. I enjoyed it. It took longer than I planned, but it's done, and I like it. So here's a shot of the quilt, head on, in all its glory. Will I do it again? Probably. Carolyn pointed out, and I think I agree with her, that the quilting is probably a little too tight. I like quilting. I wanted to see how it came out with my feathers, but really, unless it's perfect, it's too busy. It's neat, but I think it might be just a touch too busy. So Carolyn might have been right. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this episode and this series of Stars and Feathers. It is done. I'm happy with it. And now I'm going to move on to the next project. I've got 3 lined up. I still intend to make a Hawaiian shirt with a pattern I bought. I still intend to make a stuffy. I bought a pattern to make a little cute killer whale that I'll give to the dive shop. But the most pressing item is for the upcoming quilt show that we're having in Parksville next year in 2027. There is a challenge, and we've got 2 months to get our challenge piece in. And I've already got ideas for that. I just have to start working on it. So stay tuned. I'll probably show a bit of that in the next Quilting with Don. And I think I've convinced Carolyn to do a Quilting with Carolyn episode as well. She's offered to do a video on how to properly mount and straighten quilts on a long arm machine. Because I've had a few comments from people saying, there's not much information on that. People just seem to know how to do it. So I think Carolyn is willing to do that. So stay tuned for that too. Hope you have a great one and keep on sewing. Cheers.